This is David Dubal, and I am very pleased, to say the least, to have as my guest one of the foremost pianists of our time, a young pianist from Washington State, outside of Seattle. She is now playing in practically every country in the world, and we will get to know more and more about her in the next hour. We will hear her play Bartók as well as Liszt, and we will find out what makes Robin McCabe tick. How are you, Robin?
I'm fine, David.
You were just in Japan for 2 weeks.
That's right.
Tell me about this amazing, in a way, new market for the classical musician, where Beethoven is a god in Japan.
Yes, what you say is very true. It is a new market. It's a huge market. I was keeping company with Tenstedt, with Daniel Barenboim, with Gilels, everyone there wanting to be in Japan, wanting to play. And as you know, the Japanese take music very seriously, as they do everything else. Mm-hmm. The amount of diligent study is kind of incredible to me. I heard wonderful pianists, I heard some students, did some teaching, but also in the concert halls, you know, the level of concentration in their listening, you almost feel as there's no one in the hall there. It's a kind of a rarefied experience. And then if they like you, at the end, they really go crazy, which is quite wonderful.
And they did, of course, go crazy when they heard you.
I was waiting for you to give me the chance to say that.
Well, I've heard you play, and I can understand why they would go crazy.
Well, it was a good success. I had several recitals and quite a wonderful night with the Tokyo Symphony, where we did the Tchaikovsky first and the Gershwin Rhapsody, which was their idea.
Two muscular works you were doing,
Yes. Well, I took my sushi intake was high those days. I think.
Tell me one thing, Robin McCabe. Is the sushi there better than in New York? Because I love it here.
I love it here too, but I think, you know, there are more varieties, and of course they take such joy in showing you these kinds of fish which you'll probably never see this side of the ocean. But I think it's probably a little more, there's more variety to it. But I think we're lucky in New York to have some great restaurants. Now
getting back to where we belong, in the Tchaikovsky Concerto, with where you played recently, they just love this Western music, don't they? They have almost they've brought it into their culture in a way that and assimilated in a very wonderful way. I think that's right. They've almost distilled it, so it comes out. It's not that it's different than the way we would play Tchaikovsky. There's still this sort of heart on the sleeve thing that you feel, but they do love the Romantics, and they love Rachmaninoff. They love to. I noticed a lot of programming of that in the symphonic concert schedule. The Gershwin is interesting. They wanted to play they wanted to perform that, and I think that kind of style, that Americana, is still strange to them. Mm-hmm. They're very eager to assimilate it, and I had some fun with the conductor because he was so responsive to my rubatos and this just slightly sleazy cakewalk idea in the wind riding, and they picked it up very fast. Mm-hmm. It was great fun. Well, they're wonderful people, and they're playing the piano as the Koreans are now, as many Asians are, with a passion. Yes. Once the cradle of pianists were coming from Odessa. That's right. The future of the piano, in many ways, is in Asia, because this is not only a great new market. These young people who are playing the violin, the piano, and other instruments, they practice with a passion. Yes, they do, and I think the ones that have that extra X factor, whatever we want to call it, the passion, a little bit of the ecstatic, you know, that will take them through. They're the ones that we will hear on the stages in 10 years. But as far as the finesse of the mechanical training, these people they do everything beautifully. They handle the piano beautifully. Young little girls taking on mammoth Brahms sonatas, you know, which I certainly don't think I would have even tried to play when I was 14. Your teacher wouldn't have let you then, no, right? I hope not, for my sake. Robin McCabe, you are a woman with not only a great piano technique, your sensitivity to music is well known, not only on the concert stage, but to your students at Juilliard. So what I'm hoping to do here is paint a portrait of a very busy woman. I have to come here more often. This is so, you know, does me good. You're making me look so good, David. Well, really, that's not true. You see, you make yourself look good because you're on our format frequently. I program your records. I know. I'm. It's never enough, of course, but I'm always happy to hear of that. Let me ask you about the audiences in Italy. I was talking to Arau once and Ashkenazi, and they both said the audiences there are improving, while 12, 15 years ago they were rather the worst audiences around. I know that you were in Italy recently. How was that?
This was my first trip to Italy, so I can't claim to have a comparison. But I still think they are among a rather difficult group. They have their favorites as far as composers, and you can feel the level of almost response. They seem to respond to the lyric gesture more than anything else, and I'm not surprised at that, being an operatic country. I was told to be careful to play certain kinds of repertoire rather than others, and I think they're much less, if I can use the word, laconic about it now. I think they're getting more diligent about listening. I think it's more activated. So I loved it. I mean, it was a different experience, perhaps the polar opposite of a country like Japan, where everything runs in a very tight, efficient way. Italy, you get this nice sort of expansive feeling about hours and days, although there's an agitato quality there too, but it was a nice contrast.
Robin McCabe, tell me a little bit about your beginnings in music in Washington, outside of Seattle, a little city I can't pronounce.
You can try. It doesn't exactly roll off the tongue.
I can't do it.
Well, Johnny Carson has trouble with it too, because this Puyallup, my hometown, is the daffodil capital of the world.
Oh, I love daffodils.
That's one of its many distinctions, and every year my city sends Johnny Carson a huge bouquets of daffodils. So depending on how lucid he feels with the tongue, he tries to pronounce the name. But
well, you're certainly now the most important pianist ever produced by this little town. I hope they send you some daffodils.
I think I can say that. I think they'd let me have that distinction. Also, my sister's a very fine pianist, so we've got really two in them. But it's a lovely town, and it's just south of Seattle, and I'm still very fond of the Northwest. And the Northwest was very good to me. As far as my early training, it was in Seattle, and also my undergraduate days at the University of Washington. I had a fine teacher there, Bela Shiki, and it was he, after 4 years, who said, you must put your foot into the cold water now and go to New York, the so-called New York experience. But I'm awfully glad I didn't go when I was 17. You know, I think maybe I needed a little more time. I needed a little more solidity. And when I came to New York, it was still quite overwhelming to me, but a slow process, but a worthwhile one. And of course, I love the city now. I love the luxury of enjoying it and leaving it for my tours and to return.
Well, we are going to begin now listening to your recordings. And I think Liszt is a composer very much associated with you now. You have made Liszt recordings, and we're going to hear a work called Waldesrauschen by Liszt, Forest Murmur. This is almost like Wagner on the piano in a way, isn't it?
Yes, what a nice comment. It really is, this kind of impressionism that Liszt foresaw so well what was happening in music, or else intuitively he went that way. But even in a little gem of a piece like this, you can hear, as Sitwell says, the murmur of the pine trees rustling in the wood. But it has everything. It has the passion and color, and I think maybe you'd agree, David, that perhaps Liszt, if he hadn't been such a fantastic pianist, we would have appreciated his gifts as a composer more easily, because if anything, his sin was largesse. He just gave too much.
Yes.
He wrote too much, and he perhaps loved too much and played too much, but a man of mammoth talents.
Well, no longer, though, are we concerned with Liszt not getting his due, because people like you and other pianists now rank him where he should be. Not just his worst pieces are known, but a whole huge output. And, of course, at your piano literature classes at Juilliard, you have concentrated this whole year on Liszt.
Yes, the year seems to have kept them quite, the students very interested. And we've uncovered, I think, a lot that showed the extent of his work, as you say, not just the well-known pieces.
This is from an all Liszt recording of yours, isn't
it?
And it's on the label BIS.
Right. A very fine recording company out of Stockholm, which is run by a maniacal producer who's, I think, a genius in every way. And his records are consistent high quality, most people tell me. So I was very happy to make 4 albums with BIS.
Well, that's wonderful. They're beautiful in sound, and they're beautifully produced in every way. Let's listen to Robin McCabe in the concert etude of Liszt called Waldesrauschen. Oh, we've heard an exquisite performance of the etude by Liszt called Forest Murmurs. My guest, Robin McCabe, was the artist who just played that, and we will be back with more about her right after this message. This is David Dubal, and my guest today, Robin McCabe, young American pianist whose career keeps getting greater and greater. Now, you have actually had a book written about you. Think of it.
Yes, I do from time to time. I don't think about it too much anymore, but the book had an interesting birth. I mean, it was first a profile in the New Yorker magazine by a woman, a New Yorker, a writer for many years on the staff of the New Yorker, Helen Ruttencutter, and it was entitled Pianist Progress.
That was in the New Yorker, wasn't it?
That's right, the magazine.
I read it. It was a sensational article. Everyone was talking about it. Yes.
And I think part of the real impact the article had was it just wasn't just a puff piece. It was not only a story of my, if you want to call it success, my growth, but it was an everyday log of the ups and downs of trying to be a young musician in New York, and that kind of emotional struggle you go with inside of yourself, you go against, as well as outside competition. But Helen captured a lot of the world of being a young pianist, the competitions, the auditions, the
all of which you have been in with,
yes, along with many of my colleagues who were in that book, in the article. And it did have a huge success as far as the public. I had hundreds of letters from all over the world, and so did she. And several months after the article appeared, she was approached by Harper and Row to enlarge it and to write a book, which came out in 1980 under the same title, Pianist Progress. And I always teased Helen that we should have called the book Deep Steinway. We would have had lots more people buy it. But the story didn't actually finish then either, because a very talented pianist and writer who lives in Rai, Kikiko Nakamura, approached Helen and asked if she would be interested in having the book translated into Japanese.
And it is.
It is. And Mrs. Nakamura seems to have made something quite special, because all the Japanese people who approach me say it's inspirational, which I think is good, because again, it doesn't only tell the good, but if a young musician can come away reading it and thinking, well, there's a lot of me in that story. I can see myself the day that this went well or didn't go well. So I think those two ladies, and I hope I can claim some credit, we've done something for the piano world, at least I like to think so.
Well, anyone that says anything is inspirational, that's, I think, a strong and wonderful world, and we need a lot of inspiration right now.
Yes, we sure do. And, I think the life, as you know from your work at Juilliard, being a young artist is psychically not an easy struggle. Aside from your work, which requires endless hours alone, how do you develop that inner core of quiet conviction that's going to get you through, not the good times? It's easy to sail through those, but the times where maybe things aren't quite coming together as you would like. As Milstein says, it's easy to get started these days, but it's not so easy to have a career.
Yes. To get started, yes, but to keep it going, very difficult. Maybe more than ever before.
I think you're right. I tell my students that it's like a snowball. You throw yourself down the hill and hope that your snowball gathers size and momentum and significance.
I think I think it's important, though, for the young to also note that there really is more to do than ever before. I mean, it's out there now.
Yes, sure. There are more ways to be active in the music world.
Absolutely.
The resources are larger, the capacity is larger for the public, I think, to appreciate us.
We were speaking of inspiration, and I know that a Hungarian composer, not Liszt, but of this century has inspired you a great deal, and you have made a complete recording of Bartók's music, and we're going to now hear a piece he wrote around 1911.
Yes.
Am I right?
Yes.
And I love your performance of it, by the way. It's called Allegro Barbaro, and it's quite a dance, isn't it?
It is. I love the piece, and I think it's not only Barbaro. As you know, Bartók never wanted it called that at all.
Mm-hmm.
I think he called it that with a great deal of irony. But I think there's so much more to Bartók than this kind of granite-like percussive, character we often assign him. And even in a play, this kind of shrieking short piece, angry as it seems, there's some wonderful colors.
Yes, that's beautifully said. The percussiveness that we assign him, he has gotten into such a niche that way that nobody really has bothered to listen to the way Bartók plays.
Oh, that's right. It's incredible, yeah.
It's all color.
All color, yes. He must have been a wonderful pianist from all reports.
Let's listen to a wonderful pianist, Robin McCabe, in the Allegro Barbaro by Bartók. Perfectly paced performance of the Allegro Barbaro by Bartók. The artist, Robin McCabe, who's my guest today, and we will return with more about her career, her playing, her records, her future plans, and anything else she wants to talk about. Robin McCabe is my guest. She is from originally Washington State. It's a beautiful area of the world. It's cloudy there in Seattle, though, isn't it?
Well, when the sun shines, though, it's we really appreciate it. It can be cloudy, but it's a beautiful area.
You have played a large repertory, actually, and sometimes pieces that are not known. Where did you find the Firebird transcription by Guido Augusti? And tell me about him, because he's a very important teacher pianist from Italy.
Yes, he is. He's also a fine editor. Some of his editions of Debussy and Chopin,
yes.
which are quite good. I really respect them. I first heard that piece as a student in New York when I went to the master class of my first teacher in New York, Ilona Kabash, and there was a young Korean pianist who played it in the class, and I was knocked out by it. He's a fine pianist who I understand has gone back to his own country. I never heard about it after that, but I just determined that someday I would learn this piece. So one day, feeling brave, I went to Pedelson's, found the music, and went home and started slugging away. I was in love with the dynamism of it and the colors, and I thought, what a fantastic thing to put in my repertoire. And it was later that playing the piece, I think, for a few people, a couple of pianist colleagues of mine who are older and more experienced said, this, you should record this. And so the wheels were greased for me to play a few pieces for Seymour Solomon at Vanguard, and he was very interested in this. So, but it was, after 2 or 3 years of really playing with the piece, where before I felt I had enough of my own signature to put on it. But Augusti is now in Rome. This transcription dates from 1929.
Dedicated to the memory of Busoni.
And certainly in that spirit of Busoni, this magical handling of the keyboard, the keyboard colors and finger work. But I think it's quite a piece. I was asked to play it in Japan on this last tour, and they seem to love it. It's fun to play. You have to be more sort of a member of the Flying Wallendas to get over the keyboard for parts of it. You have to be an acrobat.
Yeah, a real trapeze artist. And it's on Vanguard, and I have programmed it frequently. It's a wonderful record. It has the pictures at an exhibition by Mussorgsky.
Yes.
So it's a wonderful fill to that. And it's, if anyone wants it, by the way, even before we have heard it, that's how confident I am. It's VSD 71264 on Vanguard, and we're not going to hear it all. Robin, let's hear the first part of this 3-part transcription by Augusti. It's called what?
The Infernal Dance.
And here we go with it. Robin McCabe, the pianist. You have just heard the Vanguard recording containing the Guido Augusti transcription of The Firebird by Stravinsky, and we heard the first of the three movements, the Infernal Dance, and the artist, my guest today, Robin McCabe, and right back I will be after this message or two. Robin, let's talk about the great pianist Rudolf Virkushny, who you studied with. Am I correct?
Yes, I did study with him for 3 years at Juilliard, and I think his influence on me was very important. It came at a point in my life where he seemed to be the right person for me. As a man of great cultivation, as you well know.
Yes.
He plays the piano beautifully, and he thinks beautifully, I think, about music and the world in general. And his kind of serenity, that kind of inner quality, that aristocratic quality, I think, in his playing was something that I sensed very much, that I wanted to be around. If nothing, I wanted to absorb it. And he was wonderful to me, and it remains very encouraging. One of my champions.
One of the great pianists.
Very much.
Robin, let's talk about you as a person who not only plays all over the world with orchestras and alone on stage, which is always a frightening thing, isn't it?
Yes, it's much harder, to sustain an audience's interest for 70, 80 minutes. Orchestra is much easier, I think.
Well, you have also come out on the BIS label with a recording of flute music. And who is the flutist? And tell me this repertory, because they are they're not heard often.
No, actually, Robert Aitken is the flutist. I met him years ago in Canada, where we played summer festivals together. He's an extraordinary virtuoso, and we played quite a few concerts together and thought of this scheme of recording while we were in Europe. So the one volume is French flute music, and some of these great pieces like the Jolivet Chantelinos, which is a kind of a rite of spring, almost the sacrificial dance, only for flute and piano. These smaller pieces in size by Caplet and Taffanel, this very special kind of French, very delicate, light sort of texture. So it's an interesting album. And the romantic flute, of course, we have the standard giant, the Schubert variations.
And then the not-so-standard Mozart's Son.
No, that's an interesting piece, Francis Xavier, and it's, I think, quite a little masterpiece, filled with intricacies and little subtleties. And, of course, I always feel very naked when I play Mozart, Mm-hmm. Everything is ultra-exposed, and it calls for every caliber of listening quality.
Even Mozart's Son.
Even Mozart's Son, I think so. Sure, the genes were strong.
Yes. And then Reineke's Sonata, Opus 167. So I'd love to plug these two flute records. Are they in the stores now?
Oh, yes, I hope so. At least I assume they're internationally distributed, and they are on the BIS label.
183 is the French, and 184 is the romantic, right? Mm-hmm. Well, now we have covered that area, and I know that you have played many major recitals with the great violinist Ruggero Ricci.
Yes.
So you are an all-around musician. You're probably going to end up as a conductor too, right?
I don't think so.
Mm-hmm.
That's one of my fantasies. That's just, in front of the mirror once in a while.
We've spoken of you as the touring pianist, the person who collaborates with others, the person that has had a book written on. Wow, that I think is just so impressive, and you're very young. You also yourself like to write about music.
Yes, I do. I love writing in general. I always have since my early years in school. I like the silence of it most of all, that silence of being with your thoughts. Maybe it's almost an antidote of always listening so hard to oneself when one works at the piano, and having to have the ear in another way. But I like writing about music, and who knows, maybe someday I'll write my memoirs, and you'll be in it, and you'll write yours, David. And
I'll just be happy to be in the index, under one entry.
How about
even.
A chapter?
I don't think I deserve one.
You might.
But I'll be glad to read about it. Yes.
Okay.
How would you like, Robin McCabe, to hear your performance of the Rigoletto paraphrase by Franz Liszt?
Great. I'd love it.
We're going to then. Robin McCabe in the Rigoletto paraphrase. A work that Franz Liszt wrote probably in 1861 or so. Robin McCabe, the pianist. The work, of course, based on that extraordinary moment the quartet in Verdi's Rigoletto. So it's the Rigoletto paraphrase, Franz Liszt, the composer, and, well, we're having fun listening to some of your discography. What would you like to talk about now? Do you feel that the world is coming to an end because you're not a depressed person? Do you feel that when you practice, you are providing spiritual food for the world, that you're taking it out to the stage, or do you have a much less grandiose concept?
Well, that's a cosmic question. I think my concept is less grandiose. I think when I practice, first of all, I'm providing nourishment for myself. Hopefully that will be transmitted someday on a stage. And I can't think of it in such lofty terms as you're coaxing me to, although it would be nice. I just hope that, you know, all this young talent that we see coming out in droves, you know, will be able to nurture itself with that sort of inner life. I mean, you love to draw, and I know one of my favorite sayings is by Mark Tobey, and he says that the dimension of a person's creativity depends on the space he creates inside himself. So all the work aside, we have to take the talent, the gift for granted, but what's going to happen inside that person so that he develops in a way where he can give some of his gifts to the world, and, as you say, still remain, independent and keep growing. You know, the world out there is moving very fast, but I think artists have to have that ability to be alone, to love the silence, and then to go out and be a public figure. It's a terrific conflict, isn't it?
Yes. Someone said, I think it was Thomas Vachery, who said that the more famous you become, the more difficult it is to stay on the right path.
I'm sure that's true. Yeah. The more easily you're diluted. Even I find now, and I'm comparatively young in the business, I'm so interested in so many things. How do you keep growing with the repertoire? You keep adding new things. And how do you make sure you don't go stale?
Yes, and it's not easy for a very creative person to sit and practice 8 hours a day.
No,
so
that's right.
It's such a demanding instrument also with its vast repertory, and that demand can sometimes pursue you.
Yes, it can. I think it can almost suffocate you. And, of course, people get, why don't you play this? Why don't you play that? And the temptation to, just indulge yourself in one big piano orgy of the literatures, it's tempting.
And, of course, Robin, you must know that you can never do anything right. You can't do it right for the critic who doesn't want to hear a certain piece, and certainly for the audience who comes backstage and says, well, I love your Rachmaninoff concerto, however, why don't you play a Mozart concerto?
Yes,
because that
right.
music is not as good as Mozart. And then the other person said, after you played the Mozart concerto, oh, that's a nice piece, but I was hoping tonight you would play the Tchaikovsky concerto, which I know and love.
Right, David. But I think that's why the love has to be inside. You have to do it for yourself. I think you don't choose to go into music. Music sort of puts its hand on your shoulder and says, I'm sorry, you're addicted. And, you have to like the art in you, not yourself in the art. If you're more in love with the idea of yourself being a musician, then I think all these things backstage will drive you mad. Otherwise, you still go home, you always have the music for whatever you can do with it. And if you can make tomorrow's concert maybe a little better for yourself than today's, then that keeps you going, if nothing else. To want to play better, to want to express oneself better.
I think you just said that whole concept more perfectly than I've ever heard it. We're going to hear you now, the concluding work in the 6 Romanian folk dances by the Hungarian master Bela Bartók. The artist is my guest, Robin McCabe. 6 Romanian folk dances. They are quite wonderful. All 5 minutes. Bartók just packs things in every measure, and you never know it.
No, I love to play them. Of course, they've been transcribed to death, and everyone knows them. But there's magic there, and little nuances, I think, that can be played so many different ways, and still being faithful, I think, to his intention.
You're hearing the voice of Robin McCabe, who just played those Bartók Romanian folk dances. It's been wonderful talking to you.
David, it's a pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
We're going to do it again soon.
I hope so. I'll hold you to it.
Great. This is David Dubal. Thank you for listening.